thank you to SEPTA for having me today. My name is Beth Felsen, and I am a transition coach. I work with autistic young adults almost exclusively, but what I'm going to talk about really applies to anyone, any type of disability and neurotypical students as well. So let me share a little bit with you about me, if I can get my thing to move forward. There we go. Okay. So this is all my qualifications on the left-hand side. I'm just going to highlight a few. One is that I completed the autism graduate certificate at George Mason University, which was really wonderful, very education focused, which was really interesting for me because I don't come from an education background. I am a member of several organizations that really inform my work. One is WISER, which some of you may be familiar with. Please don't ask me what it stands for because I can never remember. I'm not even sure if it stands for anything at this point, but it's really a network of local to this area professionals who work with students of varying types, including neurodivergent and neurotypical. I also belong to an organization called CAN, which stands for College Autism Network. Because I focus on autism, a lot of my work is informed by what's happening in the autism community. CAN is a really amazing group of researchers and practitioners who are very invested in college success for autistic young adults. I encourage you to Google them. It's just College Autism Network. They have some great resources on their page. I've been a volunteer in the community for a long time, and I'm also a parent. My kids are all out of FCPS, but all three of them did attend FCPS schools. And my oldest child, who's now 26, is actually on the spectrum. And I guess you would consider her 2E. So I have a lot of experience with in hindsight, 2020 hindsight, on transition, and also my thoughts on transition are really informed by the clients that I've worked with and the organizations that I belong to and what everybody is seeing once students leave the K through 12 environment. So when students leave the K through 12 environment, they can do lots of different things, as you know. Some will head to college, some will head to work, some aren't sure what they want to do. But regardless, the skills that are needed for success in adulthood are really the same across the board. So tonight, I'm going to be talking about why transition skill building is important, which skills need to be built, and why it's a really good idea to start as early as you can. I'm also going to talk about the fact that while students are building their skills, there are some skills that parents have to build as well that are really important. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you can build skills at home and how you can build skills at school, and then some questions. So that's just a basic outline of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So why is it important to work on transition skills? Well, first of all, the laws change when students leave school. I'm sure that most of the folks on this call tonight are familiar with that fact. But just to highlight a couple of things, when students graduate from high school, the way they're supported completely changes. So whereas in K through 12 education, we're really talking about, hopefully in an ideal world, providing a student with anything that they need to help them to reach their educational goals. If you want to take an AP class, the state law, they're required to support you in whatever you need to be able to take that AP class. Also, sometimes there's modifications to instruction for some students. Though that's not the case post-high school. Post-high school, you go from dealing with the IDEA to dealing with the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So if you have a child who's got a 504 plan, that's part of the ADA. So what I've highlighted here in yellow is really what I see as the biggest difference that parents aren't always aware of. And it's this whole idea of reasonable modifications. So to talk about this in a college context, if a student wants to go to college, they have to get into the college of the colleges that they apply to on their own merits. There are no alternative pathways to getting into college. And once they're there, while they can receive accommodations, the school needs to approve that those accommodations are reasonable, and the professors have to approve that they're reasonable, and they can't in any way modify the course. So that's a lot of the kinds of supports that students receive through IEPs and 504s in K through 12 environments can't really be duplicated in the same way in a post K through 12 environment. Now with employment, there are some alternative paths to employment that are can be more appropriate for students with disabilities, but other than that, you're on your own merits. So the way you interact with accommodations is different, and the way you receive accommodations is different. So in addition to changes to the law, I know this is there's a lot of stuff going on here in this picture, but what happens when your students, as your students get older, is the influences on them grow exponentially. So when your kids are young, they're very much influenced by parents, family, school. But as they get older, the influences that they receive from other areas of their life grow. They're spending less time with you. And in a post-high school environment, they want to interact more with the outside world. They're having lots and lots of influences from all over the place. So it's really important to make sure that they're ready for those influences, and for parents to recognize that their influence on their kids is going to change. It's going to diminish. So these are the reasons why it's important to work on transition related skills. So what are those transition related skills? So I like to talk about transition skills in these 6 different buckets. And then I'll say what they are. You can all read. And then I'll just talk a little bit about each of these buckets of skills. So we've got self-advocacy, executive function, social communication, also known as social skills, life skills, and then self-awareness and emotional regulation. So these 6 buckets, in my opinion, sort of encompass most of what we're talking about when we're talking about the skills that you need for a successful transition to adulthood. So self-advocacy. I've heard the word advocacy this evening quite a lot, so I don't think I really have to explain to anybody what self-advocacy is. But what I do want to point out is that it's something that we really need to learn. I think parents, and as a parent of students who had IEPs and 504 plans, I know we're advocating pretty heavily for our students pretty frequently. But what we have to remember is that when students are post-high school, they need to be able to advocate for themselves. So at some point, the torch has to be passed with self-advocacy to the students. A big part of that, in what I see in my coaching, is students understanding what their diagnoses are. I do have families who come to me and tell me that their students don't know about their autism diagnosis, or they know they're autistic, but it's never really been discussed in the family. And that's a red flag to me that self-advocacy skills are really not going to be strong. Executive function. We've all heard about executive function skills, right? So when we talk about executive function, oftentimes we're talking about school-related things, turning assignments in on time, all that kind of stuff. But also executive function really includes sort of the wider time management skills that are really bordering on life skills. So understanding how long it's going to take you to get ready in the morning so that you know what time you need to leave so that you can get to, your job on time, or that course, that class on time. So all of these things are encompassed in executive function skills. One of the best ways, I think, to work on executive function skills, or to really see where you are with your skills, is to look at self-directed and AP courses and things like that move much more quickly. That's when issues with executive function tend to really become very apparent. Life skills. We're talking about things like, can you do your laundry? Do you know how to cook? Can you manage your money? What's your transportation situation? If you don't drive, do you understand how to navigate? And are you lucky enough to live someplace where there is a robust public transportation system? If not, how are you going to get around? Social communication. So this is how I always refer to social skills. Again, I tend to work, I work with older, usually 18 and older young adults. So they're sick and tired of hearing the term social skills. So we talk about social communication. When you are out of the K through 12 environment, this really can take on a lot of new meanings, because you're going to be interacting with people in work environments. You're going to be, you may be really finding yourself needing to introduce yourself to more people than you did when you were in K through 12, because you were with the same groups, you participated in the same activities. So social communication skills really become very important. And in fact, there's some research that shows that having some friendships and having some social interactions is really, really important for success in work, in life, in family, and for your mental health. Self-awareness. So when I talk about self-awareness, what I'm talking about are things like, do you understand what stress feels like in your body? Can you tell when your stress level is increasing? Do you have some type of awareness of your emotions, what emotions you're feeling, and your physical health? Do you know what it feels like when you haven't had enough water? Things like that. So that's self-awareness. And then emotional regulation. And this is really just learning how to recognize and manage your emotions. When I work with my clients on emotional regulation, we experiment with a lot of different stress reduction techniques, breathing techniques, counting, anything that's going to help sort of bring you back to the moment when things are starting to spiral out of control. So those are very, very high-level overviews of the different buckets of transition skills that I think are really important to build. So really, when you're building these skills and you're helping your kids to build the skills, what you're really, really building is confidence and resilience and independence. So why is it important to start, let's say you have a child who's in third grade. Why is it important to start working on transition skill building when they're in third grade? I mean, they're going to be in school for a long time. They're going to be living in your house for a long time. Why is it important? There's a lot of reasons why it's important. Really, first and foremost is your child is in a loving and supportive environment with people who know them well and can help them on this journey. This journey to building these skills, you're going to make mistakes. So you want to be someplace where you have the scaffolding to help pick you back up and learn from those mistakes. You can go really slowly. So if you have a child who's got a lot of anxiety about taking on responsibility, you can go at the pace that your child needs. It's also really this period of building transition skills for adulthood, for building that confidence and resilience and independence, is a real journey of self-discovery for a lot of young adults, a lot of people and their parents. You learn things about yourself as a parent. You learn things about your kid, and your kids learning things about themselves. And being in, again, that nice, supportive, loving environment really makes all the difference. It's not a good idea to send a child off to college or to work without knowing that they have without knowing that they have the skills, right? If you're worried that your young adult doesn't have the skills, that they can sense that and they're going to lack confidence. So starting young and building slowly can be a great way to work with your kids. All right, so here's where we get into the fact that while students and our kids are building their transition skills that they need for adulthood to be successful, there are some things that parents have to work on as well. Again, let's get back to how much we all advocate for our children. Well, as part of the move to self-advocacy, that means you're going to need to pull back some. And that pulling back can be really, really stressful. I mean, no one wants their kids to fail or get into a place where they've got a ton of incomplete assignments that have to be completed, and it's very, very stressful. So as parents, we tend to want to step in and make things better, and that term, bulldozer parenting, which I love, right? You're trying to clear everything out of the way so that your child can be successful. So those are things that you're going to have to work on as a parent. You're going to have to really trust your kids. You're going to have to be very supportive in this skill building process. One of the best ways to build transition skills is by modeling the behavior. So what do I mean by that? Part of self-advocacy, scheduling your own appointments. Okay, so if your child has never scheduled a medical appointment before, the best way to teach them how to do it is to have them listen in when you schedule your own medical appointment or when you schedule an appointment for your child. I remember when my kids all were going to the orthodontist, and we would stand around the counter after the appointment trying to figure out when we were going to come in next. That's a great opportunity for your child to really see you doing the things that you need to do in order to set up an appointment. What I'm really talking about here, and what's really stressful, can be really stressful for parents, is this shift from being a manager parent to being an advisor parent. So as a manager parent, you're in the driver's seat. I like to use the analogy of an air traffic controller, right? You're watching the planes land and you're making sure that everything's running smoothly and everybody has a ride and all that kind of stuff. You're the one in control. But when you're the one who's in control, your child is not learning to build those skills themselves. So what makes really a lot of sense is to very, very slowly shift from that manager role to the role of an advisor, where they see you as a trusted adult in their life. You have open communication with your children, with all of the people on the team. The school support team, any private supports that they're receiving. And you are willing to let your child take on some responsibility for decision-making and for dealing with the consequences of those decisions. Now, I'm not talking about, every decision. But what I'm talking about is, for example, choosing courses when you get to high school. Having a conversation. If your child says to you, I don't want to take I don't want to take that honors course, or I'm right now, your child is in a self-contained classroom and you're going to start working on mainstreaming. If someone could please, if everybody could just please make sure they're on mute, that would really be fantastic. Thank you. So when you need to start listening to your kids and taking what they have to say seriously, and understanding that it might not be the choice that you might make, talking about it as a family, but ultimately letting some of those decisions rest with your child. That shift to advisor parenting, it makes a huge difference. It helps our kids build that resilience, that confidence, and that independence that we want them to have. It also helps reduce our stress. If we're sending our kids off to that next phase of their life, adulthood, whatever that means for your child, if we already know that they are capable of making their decisions, that they're capable of picking themselves back up when they fall, and that they can talk through all of that stuff with you and really build that confidence and that resilience, then as parents, we feel a lot less stressed sending our kids off. Making the shift to advisor parenting also really helps to give you a vocabulary for talking with your kids as they get older, to help them as they continue to build the skills. So the big question is, how do we do that and why is it important? So first of all, some of the researchers, some of the professors that I worked with in my George Mason autism program have done some research looking at post-high school success. And what they've found is this idea of advisor parenting is really key to that success. So this is evidence-based. Don't just take my word for it. It's not easy to do. Okay, so one of the best books that I have found to help parents through this dynamic shift, and I cannot recommend it highly enough, is this book, What Do You Say? How to Talk with Kids to Build Stress Tolerance, Motivation, and a Happy Home. The authors are William Stixrud, whose name you may recognize. He's written a bunch of things. He's pretty famous. He's actually from this area. And then Ned Johnson, who is, he does some coaching and things like that in the area. This is a great guidebook to explain to you how to start making that shift from manager to advisor parenting, how to talk with your kids, how to help support them through them making their own decisions. And I really, really highly recommend that book for everyone. And if you have students in elementary school, It's not too soon to get this. I wish I had had it when my kids were younger. So then the question is, how do you actually build these skills? So we're going to first talk about how you can build some of these skills at home. And then we'll talk about how you can encourage these skills being built at school. So what I've done, just to make it a little bit easier, is I've sort of broken this down into elementary, middle, and high school categories, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So with elementary school, and you know, the caveat here is you have to really know your own child and what their capabilities are, both physical and otherwise. So some of the things that I'm going to talk about as examples may not work for your child, but I'm willing to bet that you can figure out a substitute. So one of the best things is involving your kids in laundry. When they're very little, it may just be sorting clothes, bringing things down to wherever the washing machine is, or you know, being responsible for gathering up all the dirty clothes in their room and making sure their pockets are empty, or you know, whatever it is. But that is definitely a place where you can start giving them some life skills and also helping them to just feel confident in their ability to get things done. Making lunch. Okay, I know a lot of moms and dads out there who make multiple school lunches every day up through, you know, when kids stop bringing lunch to school, whenever that is. But there are ways, and you do it because you want to make sure your kids are going to have a nutritious lunch and they're going to have things that they like to eat and all that good stuff. But there are ways to involve your children in making lunch when they're in elementary school. One thing that I used to do with my kids was we had a shelf in the pantry and a shelf in the refrigerator that had all of the things that they were allowed to put in their lunch. And so we did this thing where it's like, okay, you need to have at least one thing from the refrigerator and two things from the pantry. And that's your lunch. Right. So this really does a couple things. One is it helps make your life a little bit easier in the morning or the night before. It gets your kids involved and again, building those skills. And also where it really helped me was I didn't get complaints anymore about, Mom, why'd you put this in my lunch? Or I don't like that, or because they were doing it themselves. So that's a great thing. Involving your kids in the activities that they do after school, starting to get used to listening to their preferences and abiding by them. Modeling behavior. We talked about that earlier in terms of making doctor's appointments. You can model all kinds of behavior. You can have discussions, family discussions are great ways to model behavior when your kids are really little. You can talk about, you know, having to pay taxes, or, you know, if you own a home and you're refinancing, you know, you can talk about that at a very high level. Just getting kids used to hearing about the big decisions that adults make all the time. Elementary school can also be a really good time to start talking with your child about their diagnoses and the accommodations they're receiving and why they're receiving those accommodations. That understanding is key to developing self-advocacy skills. When your kids get to middle school and they're a little more mature, if they've already been participating in household chores, you can start shifting some more responsibility to them. Instead of doing it with them, tell them it's their job now. And then come up with a system that works of accountability so that you can make sure that they're getting done what you need them to get done. I love a good planning meeting. In middle school is when a lot of students are at the point where they no longer have one or two teachers. They've got a whole bunch of teachers and a whole bunch of classes, and things are very different. It's a great time to institute this weekly family planning meeting. It's not to talk about birth control. It's to talk about what do you have coming up this week? So everybody sits down, maybe you have a family calendar on Google, or you've got a big old-fashioned desk calendar, but just sit down and everybody talks about some, meetings or deadlines, or, parents can talk about that stuff, any family gatherings that are coming up over the weekend, and give the kids a chance to talk about what they have coming up in school. This is a great tool to start working on those executive function skills. And it also helps with that open communication that you're really going to need to develop to make this shift to advisor parenting. Talk about money management. Again, an extension of the family discussions. Talk about allowance, talk about, okay, you're getting an allowance. Here is what it's for you to use for. We'll pay for this. You have to pay for that. And then any discussions that you're having on a higher level when the kids are in elementary school, you can start getting a little bit more in depth and start explaining a little bit about why things are the way they are. In high school, that's when really the big shifts need to happen. There are things that your kids should be responsible for themselves. I know a huge one with the clients that I work with is getting up in the morning. That's something I would suggest that you start earlier, before high school. But for the students I work with who are in college or heading to college, a lot of them are still being woken up by a parent every day. Your parent's not going to college with you. If you have a job and your job start time is later than your parents' job start time, even if you're living at home, there may not be anybody around to wake you up. So getting up in the morning by yourself and getting ready for the day, that's a huge skill building opportunity. Again, it may not happen all at once. It may be a huge struggle, but your kids can surprise you. Get more in depth into explaining why you're doing the things that you're doing. This goes back to, those more in-depth discussions. If your family is choosing not to go on a trip that other people are going on, explain to your kids why that is. That'll help them gain a better understanding of your thought process. Start asking them why. If your child says, I really don't want to go to that family birthday party, instead of just saying, you are going, that is not negotiable, that may be the end result, but ask them why they don't want to go. Start helping them to really get a handle on their emotions and that whole self-awareness and emotional regulation piece. You might have to do some negotiating. You might have to explain to them why it's important to you that they do this thing. But ultimately, you'll have to come to some kind of consensus. Advisor parenting is going to be in high gear as they get through high school, especially when they start being able to go out with friends on their own, or start spending more time away from you. You want to have discussions with them about, expectations, what your expectations are, what does reasonable behavior look like in certain situations. And they're going to be learning from their failures and their mistakes. And so you're there to help pick them back up and support them. And one of the key ways that you can help them build skills at this point is to do what I like to call a postmortem. Something happens, it doesn't go well. After the emotionality has dissipated, talk about it. What happened in that situation? And what can you learn from that situation? This may be controversial to some people, but I really believe that if you have a high school student who is able to drive, okay, and there are some programs that you can go through to determine whether they have the cognitive abilities and the reaction time that they need to be able to drive. But I really think it's an important skill. It's a big one, and it takes a lot of trust. It's a great way to work on that relationship, that advisor parenting shift. And then ultimately, it's a huge responsibility for the young adult, and it will help them learn that they can actually do hard things. So these are some ways that you can do the transition skill building at home. And here are some ways that you can work on this stuff at school. So in elementary school, you're pretty limited because, you are your child's advocate, and that's an important role. But what you can do is you can start weaving in some of these transition skills, some of these adulting skills into their IEP. You also can make sure that if you're working on something at home to build these skills, that the school team knows what you're working on, and vice versa. If they're working on something at school, like trying to get the students to turn in their homework in a particular way, you want to know what that is, so you can ask about it at home, and you can maybe see if there's a way that you can do something similar at home to support that. By middle school, I think it's really important to have your children participating in some way, shape, or form in their IEP meetings. So for some students, that's going to just really be, hey, we've got an IEP meeting coming up. We're going to be working on goals. What are some things you would like to work on? Or maybe it's some kind of a worksheet that they can have from the school that you can work on with them to help them to articulate some things that they're interested in working on in terms of their accommodations. They should be doing some self-advocacy. And I say supported self-advocacy here because what self-advocacy is probably going to look like in middle school is if your child comes home and is complaining about something that happened in school, instead of sitting down and banging out that email to the teacher to ask about it, you're going to want to sit with your child and compose that email together and talk about what should be in there. And maybe it comes from your child and maybe it comes from you, but your child should be involved. Again, communicating with the team at school is going to be critical. You also want to start looking at what are your child's goals for after high school, and what are the options that might be reasonable and make sense for your child. And your child should be involved in those discussions, again, at a way that makes sense for your child and for you. And this is probably a good time to look at what the different diploma requirements are. You're going to start making decisions about things like foreign language and all kinds of stuff like that. So you want to be aware, and you want your child at a certain level to be aware of what the different paths are that they can take to getting a diploma in Fairfax County. At the high school level, they should be, I think they should be participating, if they're able, in their IEP meetings. They should be attending their IEP meetings. You should be having discussions about accommodations at home. The second one may be something that some people are not happy with, but this is, I think, really, really important. High school is a really good time to really suss out what supports and accommodations your child really needs, as opposed to things that they've sort of outgrown but are still in their IEP. So if you were doing the weekly planning meetings, then you may be able to pull back on some supports that are supporting executive function at school, so that you can see what your child can do, and so that you can do the postmortems when things don't go well. The reason that's important is because if your child is heading to college, there are some things that they may be receiving in high school that they're not going to be able to receive in the same way in college. And so it's really important to understand, what do they really need? How can we get that when they're out of high school? what will their workplace or their college provide, and what do we need to be able to be providing ourselves? What additional supports do we need to have in place? So done the right way with everybody on board, fading some accommodations can be a really great way to build skills and resilience. And again, you're discussing your post-high school options in more detail and developing really specific transition goals. And this is where having your young adults' input is really critical. Hearing what they have to say about what they want after high school, and then working with the team accordingly to pull together some really specific goals. That's what I have. So at this point, I'd like to open it to questions. And what I'll do while we're getting that in motion is I will put up my information. So I am all about giving away information. So if you have any questions, you can email me. I would also suggest that you maybe take a look at my website. I've got a lot of blog posts about transition skills and the advisor parenting. I did a book review of the Stixrud book. And my website is spectrumtransitioncoaching.com. So how are we doing questions?
We have a few, but before we start with the questions, I had a couple of thoughts while you were presenting. You mentioned Dr. William Stixrud. We actually were lucky enough to have him as a presenter here during the pandemic. So I'm going to share the link to that presentation. It was called Building Independence in Children. It was a fantastic presentation, and this link is directly to the presentation only. So there's no business meeting aspect of this. It's just the presentation. I highly recommend checking it out. I need to go back and watch it again because I was doing tech support at that time, and it's hard for me to process all the things while I'm trying to, help the meeting run. But it was a fantastic meeting, and Michelle Cades was our president at the time and facilitating that. And I highly recommend going back and checking it out. And then you had also mentioned worksheet possibilities for working through strengths, needs, goals with children. And we also had a presentation a few years ago from the VDOE's I'm Determined project. And they have a really excellent one-pager. I'm going to put a link in the chat. For those who are listening, it's www.imdetermined.org/resource/1-pager. It is a really fantastic worksheet and can work with anybody from preschool and elementary school on up. I have an AAC user as a child, and she has been able to provide input into this for her own meetings. So it's a fantastic resource. Going on to our questions. Do you also work with adults who are not college or work bound? I love the skills you highlight for transition, and these students need to work on these issues just as their college and work bound peers do. If you do work with this audience, how do you work on those skills with them and their parents?
That's a great question. I do. Most of the time, it's so much easier to work on these skills in some kind of context. So when I work with young adults, I ask them to tell me, we try and develop some goals, so if they're looking to, everybody wants to move out of their parents' house. So that's a great goal to use as a baseline for working on a lot of independent skills. Because what we do is we list, okay, if you want to move out of your parents' house, what are all the things that you need to be able to do on your own or with little support, right? Because, parents are always going to hopefully be there, for a phone call or, to help you through something, but they may not be there holding your hand the whole way. So, Yeah. And one way to work on these skills, if you're not going to school and you're not going to be working for pay, is volunteering. Um, as a volunteer, you can work on a lot of these skills in a usually a more supportive environment than a work environment. And if you volunteer for an organization that works with people with disabilities, or has some kind of toe in that community, there's usually a lot of awareness and a lot of support and encouragement for young adults with disabilities. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
I hope it does. If not, the person who sent it can message me and let me know. She says they say yes.
Okay, thank you.
Next question is, what do you recommend for a very self-determined young adult with ADD who frequently changes their mind about their goals? Example, getting a driver's license, taking college classes.
Okay, so that is a very tricky one. What I would suggest is having a conversation with that young adult to see if you can understand why they're changing their mind so much. Sometimes what I find is it's easier to say, I changed my mind, than to say, I'm really afraid to do that thing. And so when they say they're changing their mind, or something doesn't matter, I have one client who will tell me things, and then after almost every statement, he'll say, but I don't really care about that. And the truth is they probably do. So my suggestion first would be to have that conversation about the different things about changing their mind. One of my kids, my youngest, it has significant issues with anxiety. And he really did not want to learn how to drive. Now, my father taught driver's education. So in my family, it was like everybody had to learn how to drive. But when we really sat down with him and we listened to what his concerns were, he really thought he was going to get in the car on day one and be driving down Braddock Road. And he was afraid that he was going to hurt somebody. And so we really broke it down for him, and we said, okay, here's what happens for the first, month that you don't even get behind the wheel of a car. We really, really broke it down, and we showed him that we would not let him go out and drive on Braddock Road unless we were confident that he was ready to do that. So those conversations can really be key to understanding why the mind changing is happening.
Thank you. A conversation like that would have been really helpful for me when I was learning how to drive. I'm just going to say my first experience with a highway driving may or may not have been during rush hour outside of Philadelphia, going down 95. It was interesting. Our next question. What are your thoughts on fostering self-advocacy when a child is non-speaking or minimally speaking?
Okay, so if a child is non-speaking or minimally speaking, I would say getting them some kind of AAC is critical, because without a way to express themselves, it's really going to be hard to work on some of these skills. So, I would say to that parent, make that your priority, and then you can use the learning how to use the device as a way to promote self-advocacy and really give them a voice.
Thank you. Do you work with adults who have completed education, college degree, or training, but are struggling with the job search process and keeping jobs?
Yes. So those are two different things. The job search process and keeping a job. I'm going to talk about keeping a job first. What's really important for, again, most of the clients that I work with are on the autism spectrum, but it goes for anybody. We see the same thing with a lot of different types of neurodiversity. Job fit is crucial. So that's where self-awareness can really come into play, understanding what you need. And then translating that into what kinds of jobs will give me what I need is crucial. So a lot of the clients who come to me who have been what I like to call serially unemployed, they get a job and then they lose the job, and then they get another job and they lose that job. 9 times out of 10, there is a component related to poor job fit. So that's something that we work on. We also work on the self-advocacy piece in employment when it comes to requesting accommodations. So there's a whole big struggle around, do I disclose a disability? If I do, when do I disclose it? How do I disclose it? And everybody has a different opinion on that, and you've got to do what's right for you. But what I work with my clients on is what I like to call solution-focused disclosure, which is, instead of saying, I have ADHD or I'm autistic and this is really hard for me, you flip it around and you say, I really have a hard time focusing in a noisy environment. It would help me tremendously if I could wear noise canceling headphones. That would help me focus and do my job. There's also the social communication piece, how to accept feedback from a supervisor. There's a lot there. So we do work on those things. In terms of getting a job, I am not a job coach in the sense that I don't have connections to employers, and I can't really arrange that kind of stuff. But what I do with clients who are looking for jobs is we work on all the getting the job skills. So interview prep, resume, the biggest thing is, who will you ask for a reference? A lot of the clients that I work with don't have a lot of people they can ask who are not family members. And so that can be a huge barrier, and the reason why a lot of them maybe are not out looking for jobs. So we work on things like that. We talk about how to read a job description, what the difference is between required and desired skills or certifications and that kind of stuff. And then we work on accountability in terms of, when you apply for a job, following up, saying thank you after a job interview, that kind of thing.
Thank you very much. Kind of a little bit more of a technical question. Will the slides be available with the recording?
Oh, well, I'm assuming if it's the recording, they'll be able to see the slides. Are they asking for like the PDF version of the slides? I can do that. I can create a PDF, and I don't know,
If you're willing to, we're happy to share it.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, that would be great. And then we just had another question come in. What type of job opportunities are available for adults who are limited verbally? Do they have to have a high school diploma?
That's an excellent question that I do not know the answer to. I would say that's going to vary on a case-by-case basis. I know that there are some certifications and things. I don't know if I feel like I need to shout this from the rooftops, but Google has this certification program. There's a whole bunch of different certifications that you can get online. It's self-paced. So if you've got someone who's dealing with executive function challenges, you just have to make sure you have a handle on that. But there's a certification to do IT support. There's all kinds of things. I don't think you need a high school diploma to do those certifications. And Google will then help you. They have employers who they're connected with who, provide sort of like a pipeline to help get a job. And then there was something else that I was going to add to that just completely went out of my head. So I'm sorry.
If you think about it, feel free to come back to.
I remembered. I remembered what it was. Okay, so there is a website. It's spelled a weird way, so I'm going to see if I can find it and I'll put it in the chat. But it's called Spec Rooms. It's basically a job board. It's a job board that is all jobs that are remote, that would be appropriate for neurodivergent individuals. The focus of this job board is autism, but there's so much overlap in terms of characteristics and challenges between autism and ADHD and other kinds of things. And a lot of times there's co-occurrence that I would really encourage anybody who's looking for a job situation that's remote and appropriate for someone who's got a neurodiverse mind to look at this board. So I'm gonna stop my screen share actually, so that I can access my. Why won't it let me stop the screen share? This is oh, here it is. Okay, all right. So I'm going to look it up and see if I can find it. Oh, you found it. Michelle found it. Yeah, that's it. It's a great. There's a lot of resources on there, and it's a great site.
There's a request if you could put that link in the PDF that you share with us of slides.
The spectrums
Yes.
link, I will make a note to do that.
Okay.
And then somebody just put in the chat something about Higher Autism. Yes, Higher Autism has some great resources, and they will actually work with autistic young adults. I say young adult, but I'm really talking about over 18, to help with resume writing and some job search stuff, and that's free.
Do you know if the Arc of Northern Virginia has similar resources? I don't know off the top of my head.
The Arc of Northern Virginia is a little bit more limited. I know the Arc of Loudoun actually has some resources on their webpage, including some internships. One thing that I didn't mention is for anybody who's looking for employment, internships can be really, really a great way to develop those skills that you need and to try some things on, see if you like it. I mean, I've worked with young adults in college who actually have graduated, they've studied a particular thing, never had any work experience, they get a job and then they absolutely hate it, and they're sort of in this really stuck place. So I would encourage everybody to volunteer, do internships, any kind of experiences that you can get.
Following up on the question about high school diplomas, have you worked with students who receive the Applied Studies diploma on graduation? And if so, do you remember what kind of opportunities they may have had, transitioning out?
I have not. I tend to work with what's called Autism Level 1. Is where I tend to get most of my clients. I have one client who had already graduated high school. I don't know what his diploma was, but he was taking courses at the community college at Nova.
Okay. And then just a follow-up on that as well. You had mentioned in middle school, kind of finalizing the diploma tracks. Would you say that is the same for somebody who is going for the Applied Studies diploma over a standard diploma, or does that decision get made earlier in the process?
I don't know the specifics of that. Where I'm coming at it from, if that's correct English, is you need to, there's sort of like a circular relationship between what your options are when you graduate from, I'm talking mainly about students who have their eye on going to college. They have to really make sure, like I said, you have to get into the college on your own merit. So if the college requires 2 years of foreign language and you don't have 2 years of a foreign language, you're out of luck. So you kind of have to think about accommodations and diploma and what your goals are post-college, post-high school, kind of all at the same time. And I just saw the question, what is Autism Level 1? So when the latest DSM came out, this was kind of controversial, but they sort of took away Asperger's as a diagnosis. So when I talk about Autism Level 1, it's formerly known as Asperger's. And it means autism with very few support needs, as opposed to autism level 2 and autism level 3. So autism level 3 is lots of support needs. Autism level 2 is some support needs. Autism level 1 is some support needs, but not that many.
Okay, Daphne, I hope that answers your question. I don't have any more questions that have come into me. I'm not sure if Kate has any more. No questions from Kate, I don't think. Did you have something else to share, Kate?
Sure, I can just share it. One of our board members who couldn't be here tonight has a high schooler and said that she spoke with he goes to one of the public day schools in Fairfax County, and she spoke with the team there about really implementing teaching signatures and the importance of teaching kids how to sign their names and the importance of signing your name and adding it to a document. And the teachers were very open to that idea and realized the importance of it, and maybe something they hadn't really thought of before.
That's great. I never thought about it before in this context.
One additional question I had is your slides very clearly mentioned elementary, middle school, and high school. I know we have members who are preschool parents as well. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you would add or adapt for that age group?
I don't think so. I mean, and again, you've got to know your child's abilities, but take laundry, for example. Understanding how to sort whites and darks is something that you can do with a preschooler. I mean, I used to have to supervise my kids when they did that because they would throw the laundry all over the place. It was a big game. But there are things that you can do. Preschoolers can help with cooking. Preschoolers, I think there's actually starting to be a lot more work in terms of self-advocacy with preschoolers in terms of body autonomy. And that's a great jumping off point to building other schools as well. Yeah, and Beth was saying signatures. Yeah, I mean, my youngest, I don't think even really knows how to write in cursive. So
yeah, the comment for those listening, the comment in the chat is that signatures would be great to work on for neurotypical students as well, because many of them print. And absolutely true. I certainly know people in my life who print most of the time. The only time they do cursive is when they sign their name.
Yep.
All right. I do not have any other questions. If anybody else has any that they would like to ask directly, please feel free to raise your hands or unmute. Did you have a question? Was there a question I missed in there, Kathy? Where would you include like financial skills using money? Can you talk about how you might do something like that at each of the different, like at elementary, middle school, high school? So
I will tell you something that we did with our kids that annoyed them, but they understood the lesson, right? We used to, from the time they were very little, when they would get dessert, we would take taxes. We would take a little piece of their dessert and say, okay, that's our taxes. And that was how we started the conversation about the fact that, when you earn money, the government, takes some money to make the government run. And we started having conversations about taxes that way. We also gave them a small allowance when they were little, and had discussions about what it was for. So if you want, what we would pay for and what they would have to pay for. That's a way to start introducing it. When my kids were in elementary school, we had it was unfortunate, but one of the neighborhoods that we would drive through to get to our house, this is when the housing market really took a nosedive, and a lot of people, there were a lot of foreclosures, right? So, those bright green and fluorescent notices started appearing on front doors of houses, and the kids wanted to know, what is that? And so we explained it to them. We took the opportunity to, on their level, explain to them, how you buy a house and what a mortgage is, and, that kind of stuff. When they got a little bit older, we got them, when they started driving is really when we did it. They each had a credit card on my account. And so we talked about, responsible, being responsible with credit and, how that works. And actually I wish they would design it a little bit differently, but the economics and personal finance course in Fairfax County is a great tool to use to have these discussions as a family, to ask about, what are you doing in that course? And, what are you learning about? And, it was made for some very interesting dinner time discussion in my house. Let's put it that way.
I can definitely see that. Another thought that was shared with us just now is encouraging and helping older children, adult children, draft a medical power of attorney and living will, so that parents can be informed as to what's going on in medical emergencies.
Yes. Yeah. So where that comes into play a lot is also when students if they're going to college, the privacy laws kick in, all the FERPA stuff. And so that a lot of parents don't realize that even if your child is under 18, which doesn't happen very often, but if they're in college and they're under 18, it still applies. And so having those kinds of conversations and talking about medical directives, and very important.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions or thoughts you'd like to share with the group on this? Do you have any closing thoughts or comments for us, Beth?
No, just to say thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with everyone. And to whom should I, oh, you're very welcome, Beth. To whom should I send the PDF? And I'll put together like a list of some links to spectrums and some other resources that might be helpful.
You can send that to me, Beth. I'll make sure it gets to our comms team.
Okay.
So it's just president@fairfaxcountysepta.org. Thank you so much for everything you shared tonight. This was a fantastic presentation.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
I have an elementary schooler, and I was not sure coming in if like how this was going to apply to my child. I mean, I knew what it said. It's never too early to start, but the really practical examples of how to implement it at the different ages was super helpful. We really appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
You're very welcome.
Maybe we can have you back again in the future.
Maybe you can.
Thank you also to all of you who attended and joined us tonight with the voting and everything else. We really appreciate your support and your presence here tonight. Before we head out, I do want to make a couple of additional announcements. One I forgot to add at the beginning in my president's report is I was recently appointed to the Virginia PTA State Advocacy Committee as a subject matter expert in special education. So I will be representing special education advocacy needs on the state level this year. I'm looking very forward to working with Virginia PTA's new advocacy chair, Ashley Smith. She and I met at National PTA Conference over the summer, and she is a fantastic resource, and I'm looking very forward to the work that we can get done on the state level. So those advocacy priorities that you voted in for the state level, you will have somebody from SEPTA working to foster those at the state level. So thank you very much for that. A couple of quick announcements about upcoming dates. Fairfax County Council PTA will be having a webinar on Monday, September 26th at 8 p.m. I am aware that this is Rosh Hashanah. I believe that this will also be recorded and available after the event. So if you cannot attend, this will be available at another time. It is entitled Empowering Safer Kids. And the description is that, here's the good news. You can make your kids safer any place they are. Join us for a discussion about how healthy relationships increase the chance your child will ask for help when things go wrong. Learn what research tells us makes kids more susceptible to harm in organizations. So it should be an informative webinar. Again, that's Monday, September 26th at 8 p.m. and is virtual. As we mentioned earlier, the school board work session on the AIR special education audit final report will be Tuesday, October 4th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. There is a possibility it will go longer than that. Be prepared. School board work sessions often go over their time, although they will probably take a break for lunch. That same day, they are supposed to be working in the afternoon from 12:30 to 3:30 on their legislative program. So all of that will be on their YouTube channel, so you do not need to tune in at the same time. It'll be available after as well. The next school board meeting is Thursday, October 6th at 7 p.m. at Luther Jackson Middle School, and public comment sign up for that will open the Friday beforehand. It's a lottery, so that feel free to enter. If you would like to register with a pre-recorded video, you will need to have that 36 hours in advance of the meeting. And the next advisory committee for students with disabilities meeting is Wednesday, October 12th at 7 p.m. Please note on the agenda, this is in a different physical location than it has been in past years. ACSD needs to move to a different location to accommodate other committees that are meeting at the same time. So the new meeting location will be in the Willow Oaks building, not Gatehouse Administration Center. This is a different physical location, and it is in room 1000B. And after that, our next event, please save the date for October 15th. We're hoping to have a SEPTA playground picnic. We are working to get that squared away, hopefully with Laurel Ridge Elementary, and more information will come on that in the future, hopefully soon. And then save the date for November 15th. We will be hosting a virtual webinar again that evening on bullying and harassment of students with disabilities. This will be led, Sherry, please correct me if I'm wrong, by an attorney from the U.S. Department of Education. Is that correct? Okay, thumbs up, I'm right. Thank you. So please prepare to join us for that. That again will be a virtual webinar starting at 7 p.m. And then please save the date for Saturday, December 3rd. We will be hosting like kind of a half-day event. We don't quite have the times and locations yet.
She's an attorney for the Office for Civil Rights. Is that what you said?
I said Department of Education, but Office of Civil Rights.
For Civil Rights, yeah.
Thank you. December 3rd, Saturday, December 3rd, we're going to have IEP Palooza. So we're going to have a bunch of sessions all geared towards how best to help families and students with their IEPs. So look for more information on that to come. It will be more than just 1 hour. All of these dates, Kate, I do believe we have a one-pager. Is that correct with all of those dates? All of our event dates? Yes. I'm not quite sure if that's on the website yet, Beth, but we can make sure it's on the website soon. I can make sure that's on there tomorrow. And I think that's it. So does anybody have any questions on any of the upcoming events that I mentioned? All right, any other thoughts for the good of the order before we say goodbye to everyone for the evening? Oh, the next general membership meeting, Heather, is that November date, November 15th. We will have a small general membership meeting, I believe, as part of that, and then the presentation. Seeing no other questions, I will adjourn the meeting. And Kate just put the one-page flyer of the SEPTA events in the chat, so please feel free to download that. And if you'd like to save the chat, everybody should have that option. Just above your chat window, there's little 3 dots. Press on the 3 dots and you should be able to save the chat if you'd like. We are ending a little bit early.